The sky over Earth changed in a single terrible moment, and no one who saw it ever forgot the feeling that followed, because 1 second the world felt normal and safe, and the next second space itself seemed to tear open above the planet as massive black shapes forced their way into orbit, their hulls dark like burned metal and marked with glowing red symbols that no human language could read. And every satellite, telescope, and sensor on Earth screamed the same warning at once, confirming a fear humanity had whispered about for years but hoped would never come true. Because these ships belonged to the Karvik, a species known across distant star systems not as rulers or explorers, but as hunters who existed only to track, test, and destroy other intelligent beings. And their arrival meant that Earth had been judged worthy of the hunt. Long before humans reached the stars, stories had spread through alien space about the Karvik, tales told in fear about worlds that grew strong, developed weapons, and believed they could defend themselves, only for the hunters to arrive without warning, tear apart defenses with terrifying skill, and erase entire civilizations until nothing but broken cities and drifting ruins remained. And now those same hunters hovered over Earth like patient predators circling wounded prey. Human leaders did not waste time with hope or denial, because they had prepared for this moment in secret drills and worst-case plans, and within minutes the planet's defense fleets launched into orbit, hundreds of ships rising together in a desperate show of unity, fighters flashing past carriers, old defense platforms waking from long sleep, every pilot knowing they might not return, but launching anyway because Earth was their home. The battle that followed was fast, brutal, and one-sided as human weapons struck first, filling space with bright lines of fire, missiles, and railguns slamming into the enemy. But the Karvik ships barely slowed, their armor absorbing damage that should have destroyed anything built by humans. And then the hunters answered with weapons that burned through hulls and shields as if they were nothing, slicing human ships apart with cold precision, leaving wreckage spinning silently through space while distress calls cut off one by one. On the ground, people watched the fight on screens in homes, shelters, and command centers, holding their breath as symbols representing human ships vanished again and again. And fear spread like a shadow because everyone understood that if the fleet failed, the hunters would land. And history said that once the Karvik landed, no world survived. Then, just as suddenly as the slaughter began, the enemy ships stopped firing, and confusion spread through human command as the hunters formed a wide circle around Earth. Weapons powered down, their movements calm and controlled, as if the battle had never mattered to them at all. And a single massive ship moved forward, scarred by countless past wars, carrying the weight of countless victories. A signal cut through every human system at once, overriding languages and codes, showing only a simple but terrifying image of a claw crushing a skull, followed by a deep, emotionless voice that announced Earth had been chosen for the hunt and demanded that humanity send out its strongest champion, offering a cruel choice between surrendering one fighter or facing total destruction. And that moment of silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, because Earth had armies, fleets, and weapons, but no single warrior who could stand against legends that had wiped out entire species. Deep beneath the surface of the planet, far from the fear and noise above, a reinforced door slid open in a hidden facility where secrets had been buried for decades. And inside, a woman named Mara Vance opened her eyes, calm and focused as alarms echoed faintly through the walls, because she had been waiting for this moment her whole life, trained and changed by a project that humanity never spoke about, a last answer to an impossible enemy. And as she stood up, stretching muscles strengthened beyond normal limits, she felt no fear, only purpose. Because while the Karvik believed Earth was prey calling out in panic, Humanity was about to show them something they had never faced before. Not a fleet or a weapon, but a human who would walk forward instead of hiding. And in that quiet underground room, as the fate of the planet hung in the balance, the real story of Earth's defiance truly began. Mara Vance stepped out into the open air, leaving the safety of the underground facility behind. And for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of every eye on her, because every screen, every camera, and every human on Earth watched her as she moved toward the landing field where the Vex shuttle hovered above the ground like a dark omen, the heat from its engines sending waves across the pavement and shaking the soil beneath her boots. And yet she walked without hesitation, her body calm, her mind clear, because she had been trained for this moment, conditioned to react faster, think sharper, and fight harder than any ordinary human could, and she carried only her combat suit, a dark gray material worn smooth by years of practice, and her blade, old and simple, but balanced and deadly in her hands. The alien shuttle opened, and the hunters emerged, their forms tall and thin, with 4 arms ending in razor claws, their feet long and pointed, moving with unnatural grace, and their faces hidden behind bone and metal masks that reflected the sunlight with a cruel shimmer. And among them, their leader stepped forward, larger and more imposing than the others, its glowing red eyes focused solely on her, radiating a confidence built from centuries of conquering worlds, a confidence that humans had never seen. And it spoke in a voice that echoed in her mind rather than through the air, asking if she was the champion Earth had sent. A question meant to intimidate, to make her hesitate, to break her will. But she smiled instead, letting no fear show in her face, because she knew that strength was not just in weapons or numbers, but in the refusal to bow before terror, and she told them that she was not the champion but the answer. A statement that confused the hunters because they had never met a species that understood the hunt so fully that it answered with defiance. Without warning, the hunters attacked, moving faster than human eyes could track, their claws swinging, their energy weapons cutting through the air with lethal precision, and Mara reacted instinctively, rolling under beams, flipping over attacks, and using her blade to block strikes that could have shattered bones. And every motion was sharp, fluid, and devastating. Because her body had been enhanced, her reflexes pushed to the limits. Her muscles stronger than anyone expected, and yet she moved with a grace that made each blow count, exploiting every weakness in her enemy's form, striking at joints, disabling limbs, and even using the hunter's own weapons against them, turning their strength into their weakness. The battle became a blur of motion and sound, sparks flying as claws met metal, energy beams igniting the ground around her, and alien screams blending with the roar of engines and the distant sounds of human ships fighting above. But Mara never faltered, never hesitated, because she understood that hesitation meant death not just for herself, but for everyone watching, and she felt time stretch around her as she fought, perceiving each movement, predicting every strike, landing blows that left hunters dead or incapacitated until half of the aliens lay on the ground, stunned or broken, and the leader of the hunters, witnessing this unprecedented carnage, roared in fury and charged at her, a living mountain of muscle and claws, intent on ending the challenge personally, and Mara met it head-on. Their bodies crashing together with the force of a meteor impact, the ground beneath them shattering, sparks and dust flying into the air, and yet she did not falter, because she had prepared for this, studied every known tactic of the hunters, and trusted her own strength and speed beyond any doubt. And when the leader lifted her with a single arm, intending to crush her, she laughed, a sound full of defiance and challenge, and drove her blade deep into its chest, piercing armor and flesh, and watched as it fell, screaming and dying. its reign of terror ending at her hands. Silence followed, heavy and complete, broken only by the distant echoes of the human fleet above, which had begun to regroup and fire with renewed vigor, inspired by the sight of one human standing against monsters they thought invincible. And Mara's voice carried across every communication channel, broadcast through every ship and satellite, declaring that Earth was no longer prey, that if the hunters wanted the rest of humanity, they would have to face her. And that simple message shattered centuries of legend and fear, because the Karvak had never encountered a species that fought with both cunning and courage, that could turn a single fighter into a symbol of defiance so powerful that an entire fleet hesitated. And for the first time in their history, the hunters paused, unsure of how to proceed, as the human ships rallied, firing with renewed hope, and the leaderless hunters retreated in confusion, leaving the battle unfinished but showing the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. And Mara, standing alone on the scorched battlefield, looked up at the sky, knowing that this was only the beginning, that the Karvak would return with everything they had, and that humanity would need every ounce of strength, courage, and ingenuity to survive the true hunt. And yet she smiled, because she had already shown the universe that humans did not hide. Humans did not surrender, and a single human could stand against even the deadliest hunters the galaxy had ever known. A week passed, and the quiet that had followed the first battle was broken by the return of the Karvak, this time not with a single ship or a small force, but with an entire armada that darkened the skies and filled space with shadows the size of cities. And Earth trembled under their presence as cities burned, orbital strikes turned oceans to steam, and human fleets scrambled to defend the planet with everything they had. Missiles streaking across space, energy beams cutting through the darkness, and fighters diving through enemy lines in desperate attacks, each human knowing that the margin between survival and annihilation was razor-thin, yet refusing to yield because they had seen what one human could do, and that knowledge gave them courage. Even as fleets were torn apart, space stations destroyed, and debris rained down on cities below, shaking the foundations of buildings and the hearts of those who watched, Mara Vance, now aboard a human strike ship specially modified for this mission, stared through the reinforced viewport at the largest enemy ship, the flagship of the Karvak fleet. Immense and scarred, bristling with weapons, the heart of the hunt itself, and she felt a mix of fear, determination, and resolve, knowing that she could not allow this monster to continue, that Earth's survival depended on taking the fight directly to it, because running or hiding would only invite complete destruction. And though her body ached from the previous fight, every muscle bruised and bone strained, she understood that this was the final battle, the moment where one human could turn the tide of an entire war. And she prepared herself mentally for what she would have to do. The plan was simple yet deadly, relying on speed, precision, and sheer audacity, because conventional weapons had failed to stop the hunters, and the only chance humanity had was to strike at the core, to destroy the flagship from within. And Mara, trained for years in secret, enhanced far beyond normal human capacity, would be the one to do it, launching herself into the ship through an airlock while human forces engaged the fleet outside, creating the chaos necessary to reach the heart of the enemy vessel. And every step she took through the corridors was a test of endurance as hunters attacked in waves, their claws slashing, their strength immense, their numbers overwhelming, yet she moved with grace, speed, and lethal precision, each strike calculated to disable, each movement designed to survive, using walls, shadows, and the enemy's own aggression against them, until the halls were littered with fallen hunters, and she reached the core of the ship where the gravity bomb waited, a device built to destabilize the massive vessel but unstable enough to destroy anything nearby, including herself. Surrounded by dozens of hunters who had not yet been defeated, Mara planted the device at the center of the ship, feeling the pulse of alien energy around her, the hum of machinery that had hunted countless worlds, and she understood that this moment was a choice between fear and courage, between life and sacrifice, and she chose courage, because she had been humanity's answer once, and now she would be its shield and sword. And with a deep breath, she activated the bomb, knowing it would trigger a chain reaction that would collapse the flagship on itself, crushing hunters, engines, and weapon systems in a violent explosion. And the force of it tore through space, sending shockwaves that disabled nearby ships, scattering the Karvik fleet in panic. Some fleeing in fear, others destroyed by the chaos. And for the first time, the hunters knew defeat. Outside, human ships rallied, firing with renewed hope as the alien armada faltered, their formations broken, their confidence shattered. And Earth's people looked up at the sky with disbelief and rising joy as they saw the impossible happen. Because a single human had not only survived, but had turned the tide of war. And though Mara would not return from the core of the enemy ship, her action saved billions, proved that humanity could stand against legends, and left a mark across the galaxy that would be remembered for generations, inspiring not only Earth, but other civilizations who learned that even the deadliest hunters could be challenged when courage, intelligence, and determination came together. The Karvik who survived retreated, leaving the planet to rebuild, carrying with them the lesson that humans were not prey to be hunted, that one human could defy their expectations, and that the species they had once dismissed as weak could, in the end, fight with a ferocity, creativity, and resilience that no legend had prepared them for. And in the aftermath, while Earth mourned the loss of Mara, statues, stories, and records were made to honor her sacrifice, a symbol of hope, strength, and defiance. And across the galaxy, whispers spread from star to star, telling every species that humans did not cower, did not surrender, and if anyone came seeking to hunt them again, they would face her or the next like her, and they would walk out to meet the challenge, unafraid, unbroken, and unstoppable, proving that even against impossible odds, humanity could rise, fight, and win.